This is the Nielsen Norman Group UX podcast.
I'm Therese Fessenden. It's 2025, and the year is off to a bumpy start. Tech layoffs are top of mind for thousands of UX employees as companies begin their year restructuring and re-strategizing to capitalize on all the efficiency that AI firms seem to promise. Teams are once again grappling with old but renewed challenges like, how can we demonstrate that research is crucial for better decision-making? How do we secure the budget that we need to continue functioning? But also, how can we use these shrinking budgets that we do have to continue bringing quality work? The answer to all of these questions? Getting strategic about the work that we do. Today, I'm featuring an interview between NNG Director of Research Maria Rosala and ResearchOps pioneer Kate Towsey. She has been a profoundly influential leader in the ResearchOps community for the past decade and has recently authored a watershed book called Research That Scales, the Research Operations Handbook. The way she puts it, this book helps researchers find their operational muscle and deliver unmissable value to your organization. In this episode, we talk about what ResearchOps really is, common misconceptions about it, how to shift the perception of UX work, and how people of all levels can get strategic about their work.
Welcome, Kate, to the Nielsen Norman Group UX podcast.
It's so great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I'm super excited to talk about ResearchOps and, of course, talk a little bit about your new book. Before we sort of dive into that, Kate, I would love to maybe start off with a few intro questions. I know a lot of people are really familiar with who you are, but there probably will be some listeners who are really new to research operations and also possibly haven't read your stuff or heard a little bit about, your trajectory into the field of research operations. I think your sort of background and your career is really interesting and very varied and sort of has perfectly positioned you as a industry leader in research operations. I wondered maybe you could give us a little bit of a lightning tour through your career and how you ended up in research operations.
It is pretty colorful. So I actually come from a fine art background. And that's not, you don't kind of go, oh, of course I'm going to study fine art to get into operations, never mind research operations. But the kind of fine art I studied was conceptual. And so it was really about how do you create visual, but also tactile or audio experiences that enable people to experience, your viewer or your participant, to experience the world in a different way. So I started out in fine art. I ended up in radio journalism, actually working on radio documentaries, which I absolutely loved. Worked all over Southern Africa, working for an NGO and making content on everything from community tourism to HIV/AIDS and child-headed households. So it was just the most incredible experience. Then decided at the young age of, I think, 24, 25 to head off to India and became a yoga teacher for a long time. I sort of missed out. In between that, there was I was a professional musician. You'll see drums and various instruments in my background. And I played I was a punk rock musician for a long time, and I ran a punk rock community. It was me and 500 skater boys and girls in South Africa. So that was my first community that I started. And eventually, after sort of 10 years of various things happening, I ended up in England, realizing that I had no career left and I needed to reset my life a little bit. And yoga teaching's a career, but I wanted something different. And through various twists and turns, found my way into content strategy via operations. But I'd been working for an e-commerce company and setting up their operations just because it was disorganized and I could see lots of ways to organize it. And so I set up systems. And that was really kind of the start for me. After that, everything kind of rolled straight into this world at GDS, at the Government Digital Service in the UK, where I was asked to create not even to create anything. That was not the brief. The brief was help the 40 researchers working in government at this time to make the most of the knowledge that they create so that we don't lose it all the time. That evergreen, I mean, this is huge at the moment, thank goodness. But that was my brief. Soon realized that I was not a librarian, and even as a pretty good content strategist, did not have the skills for building a library, which has informed a lot of my work over the past 10, 13, 15 years. But got to build research labs. I came from sound. And so I loved working back in audiovisual, creating panels and video libraries and all these sorts of things. And that's really where my kind of start in research operations began.
And I think after that, your stint at GDS, you eventually joined Atlassian. Is that right?
I did. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So I worked at GDS. The interesting thing with that was research operations wasn't a big thing yet. We're talking 2013 to 2016 around about. And I was a consultant, and people wanted to hire me to be a researcher after I'd spent these years researching researchers, some of the most amazing researchers at GDS at the time. And so I ended up working as a researcher for a few years, even though I would say to people, I'm really not a researcher. I'm actually a content strategist. And yet they kept hiring me, and people weren't dying, and it was fine. So, and products were improving. So it was actually quite useful in the position I'm now in to have that stint on the other side of the fence. And then Atlassian got in touch. Lisa Rakelt from Atlassian, I'd worked with her for a number of years before on various things. And she got in touch and said, hey, have you ever thought about coming to Australia? Because Atlassian's headquarters are here in Sydney, where I'm now based full time. And I said, never in my life have I considered going that far east. It's so far east, it's west. But the timing was just perfect for me. And I thought, I've got nothing to lose. And what an incredible opportunity to set up from scratch a global research operations team and to really nut down and experience and explore and play with what is that all about. And it was an incredible learning experience for me. And a lot of the content in the book is about those experiences, not all of it. A lot of it's from other experiences too, but also about the things I didn't experience. I write to, speaking from an art perspective, to both the positive space and the negative space, and the things that weren't there that I think should have been there, that I didn't get to build or I've seen elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super interesting. I know that there may be some people listening to this podcast who are pretty new to research operations, and maybe the definition is a little bit blurry for them. I wondered whether, Kate, maybe you could, obviously there are lots of different definitions for research operations out there, but how do you define it when someone asks you what research operations is?
Yeah, there are many definitions, and I'm a proponent of some of them. Someone should draw a timeline of how my definition has changed over time. Having written a book, I've had to think deeply about, obviously, what research operations is, and my best definition is that it's research operations professionals or people banding together to deliver research operations. It's valid too. They deliver the systems that enable people to do research, but not only to do research, also to, and this is very important, also to consume research and act on research. I've been someone who said in the past, and I've even said it already in this podcast, back in 2013, working at GDS, I did a lot of researching of researchers. We've got to extend that and research our stakeholders, our consumers, our participants, and build a singular cohesive space that enables these people to commune together around knowledge, to share knowledge, to absorb knowledge, and then to have confidence to make great decisions using it.
Yeah, I think that's it's really important that we think about, as you're sort of saying, this is a system that we're building to kind of create the right atmosphere for research to really thrive. So I totally resonates your definition there. I think one of the things in the book that I really liked, I think you're sort of someone after my own heart in terms of using analogies, and there's plenty of analogies in your new book, which I really, really enjoyed. I think one of the analogies that I thought worked really well is how you mentioned how, designing a system to encourage good research to happen and for research to be impactful is a little bit like civic design.
Yeah.
I wondered whether you could kind of walk us through how that works. Why do you think of it as civic design?
When I was looking through the the elements of research operations, and perhaps, Maria, this is a good time to share what the elements are. Can I hop into that part?
Of course. Yeah, please do.
Because that kind of really sets the scene for why civic design is so relevant, and is relevant in countless ways. Okay, so this is called the Venn diagram of research operations. And one of the things, it's a bit to describe in here. Part of this, if you start from the top, participant recruitment, one of the elements, primary piece, everybody's biggest pain point typically is participant recruitment. And if not the same pain or similar, is knowledge management. We've got onboarding and support, tools and vendors, ethics and privacy, money and metrics, program management, people and skills. And around this is culture and practice. What often happens, and I used to do this, is see participant recruitment as it's kind of this one thing that I need to deliver. But the moment you start working on participant recruitment, you'll find that you are needing to dip into knowledge management. What do we do with the knowledge that comes out of these research studies, or where do we store the knowledge that we have about participants? Or even the taxonomy that sits tight, that kind of enables us to recruit participants. How do we match that taxonomy to our research library or the research repository? Two different things. How do we onboard and support people, including participants, into being part of our participant recruitment program? What are the tools and vendors we need? Ethics and privacy. And so I could go on. And so the Venn diagram really is illustrative of the fact that all of these pieces of the research operations puzzle are one thing. They're interconnected. If you touch one, you will end up working on them all. One of the key reasons that research operations often so misunderstood or so wildly underestimated in the amount of effort and time it takes is because this Venn diagram is not understood. So someone will scope out the participant recruitment bit, but fail to scope out all of the other elements of ResearchOps that are required to actually make the whole system work. And we can go back to the civic design question, because where that fits in is I realized when I was looking at the elements and looking at how they all fit together, that when you live in a city, let's say you could pick London or New York, or really any kind of big metropolis, you will have a bank. That's where you get money, and you'll kind of look at your metrics on a monthly or quarterly basis and understand, how much do I pay the tax person? What kinds of funds do I have left over? All those sorts of things. You will have a library, or a bookstore at least, where you can go and you can pick up knowledge, pick up artifacts that hold information on cooking or whatever you want to learn at that point. You will have, if not the traditional town hall of many years gone by, you will have places that you can gather with people, a pub, a bar, a tennis court, a gym. You'll have all these different things that really a lot of the time reflect the 8 elements, places to learn, universities, places to onboard into your civic society. You arrive in a country, if you've ever moved country, and one of the first things you have to do is head off to the local council's buildings and go and get your cards and your various things, and they tell you how things work and you onboard into the environment. So this is really where you start to see these independent buildings of civic design within the research space. But the thing that makes a city work is commuting. And this is something that we very often forget about, is both commuting and culture. And so there's roadways, but they're not just roads randomly around. They're put it in such a way that you can get from the library to the bank to this place, to that set of participants, to Chinatown, to the particular parts of the city with different cultures, to meet different people and have different experiences. And so transport specialists specifically design all the roadways and the systems, the buses, the tubes or the metros, all these different bicycle paths, depending on your budget and your capabilities, your skills even. Can you drive? Can you ride a bike? Can you only walk? To be able to get to all these places. So hopefully you're starting to see how that layers into a very much more cohesive way at looking at the systems design of research operations, or even just systems of research. It's one thing to procure a tool. It's like procuring, like building a building in the middle of a field and expecting that people will just be able to make it there regardless of their capabilities, the things that they've got around them to help them, and the weather. They're just going to be able to walk up and down to this one building and have a great time. You have to kind of think of the commuting. The last point of this, which I absolutely love, is that, and I mentioned this in the book, is that the way something is shaped and how it feels and your experience of it from the moment you land in the country or the city, if you just move across the state or whatever, will change how you experience and how therefore you feel and think about research, in this case, the city of research. In New York, there's something called the broken windows theory. And they realized, look it up on Wikipedia or on ChatGPT or wherever you want to go. And it's about crime. But it's interesting because at some point someone realized actually broken windows and graffiti on the wall creates an atmosphere that feels like you can get away with being a criminal. And so people do. Mm-hmm. And so if we tidy the place up and make it look nice, behavior will change. Mm-hmm. There's arguments about how true this is, but the theory is there that the environment that you're in and how you set it up and how it's cared for will create culture. Mm-hmm. And so that's that layer of as well of creating that civic space with all the functional pieces in it, the buildings in it, but then creating the network and the ability, the layers for people to, whatever their capabilities or assets, to be able to get there and be successful in how they use it, but then also feel good on the way. Generate a culture, New York, grid lines straight, get there, move, move, move. Champs-Élysées, it's different. You browse the stores.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that analogy, and I love the way that you've sort of portrayed research operations as this really exciting role to architect something quite magical within your organization. Because too often people sort of see research operations, as you were sort of mentioning, as it's participant recruitment, it's procuring these tools, it's enabling researchers to do X, and it's so much more to it than that. It really requires like that kind of service design thinking and that systems design thinking, and even the points around like architecting something to kind of create the types of behavioral those behaviors that people might be exhibiting is something that you might be thinking about. I wonder, like, for some people listening to this, they might be thinking maybe they're starting their journey in research operations. It's their first role, and they're thinking, "Oh my goodness, I have to architect a city."
Yeah.
How do you sort of ease yourself into it and start to? Because obviously everything's so interconnected. How do you find out where to start and how to kind of start in a sustainable way on this path for this journey?
So the first point is, to stick with the analogy, is that every city started as a village. So hold that in mind, that no one's expecting you to come and manifest Rome in one day. These cities were developed over centuries. You probably don't have centuries to do it. Typically in the world we live in ResearchOps, you need to show some value pretty quickly. But if you start smaller and think through, even if you're going to put one building in the field, think through that. How do people commute to it? What experience do they have when they walk in the door? What level of skills do they have? What are they wanting to get out of it? It's very standard user journey, service design type stuff, just to replace the systems with service, because we've got such incredible skills at our fingertips. Probably someone sitting in the same office as you, and if you're not in an office, a Slack message or an email away has these skills to be able to work out, is it let's look at a research library. Is it a researcher coming to the research library with a lot of experience of the organization and the do they have a template that you've given them for this is how we create a research report so it's consistent? Do they have a high skill in creating reports? Maybe they come from an academic background and they feel very comfortable with that. It's easy for them. But there might be other researchers who are junior who need a little bit more help, or a person who does research, a designer, product manager, marketing professional who really needs a lot more structure or help. But then you've also got stakeholders who might come and want a quick answer, others who want an in-depth answer, and others who want a literary review or a secondary research report. And so looking at like these visitors to your research library, literally walking into your building, how do all of them get there? How quickly do they get there? What do they want when they come here? And how do we design it so that it really looks after everyone's needs, other than just being, library there, all the research in it, job done. Mm-hmm. So that's you don't have to build the entire city at once, but when you do start building, think through the commuting, think through who's visiting, think through the experience you want them to have. The second thing that's really, really important is, I'd call it knee-jerk operations. And things move so fast in this day and age. Like, Maria, it's just nuts. I mean, there's so much noise and speed in our lives that it's difficult to actually think straight sometimes. Our nervous systems are wired to react. And so it's like, there's a problem. We need a library or we need a panel. But what you need to do is that you have to kind of start stepping back and going, let's pause for a moment. And let's think about what kind of participants we want or what kind of library we want for what purpose, so that we can actually think about our strategy now. What is going on in the organization? Who is most important? What do they need from us? And what kind of building are we going to build? Is it going to be a very stately looking, like neoclassical building that executives want to come into and like feel at home and feel that they're getting like the cream of the crop in terms of research knowledge in the organization? Or is it a McDonald's takeaway, where drive-through, where you're kind of driving through and everybody just wants to quickly pick up their report and go? The style of the design is going to be very different depending on what you want. And even the format of the content is going to be very different. So now you have to really step back and go, okay, well, who's important and what's important? And therefore, what are we going to build? If you can start with that, then even if it's one building that is really purposeful, you can measure exactly, are you looking after those executives who want to like feel that they're getting the cream of the crop knowledge and that they're empowered to make amazing strategic level decisions? If you can measure that and go, yeah, we're doing, it's very likely that you're going to be seen as successful and valuable, and you'll get more money to build another building next door. And now maybe you build the McDonald's for everybody else so they can get their drive-through. I'm not sponsored by McDonald's, by the way.
Yeah, I think that that's very true, that there are a lot of research ops professionals or even researchers or people within the organization that have been sort of told, like, we need this, can you make this happen? Like, we need a repository. And so they kind of just chug along and start building it and asking what other people have done and maybe copying and emulating that without really stopping and thinking, what do we actually need here? And I think this is, a really great piece of advice that we give designers is don't necessarily just accept a solution that's been presented to you by a stakeholder, like really critique it and think about what is the underlying problem here that we're trying to solve for, and what do we want to really achieve? And then we work from there. So I really love that advice, and it's definitely true of lots of aspects of design.
You're making me think it's almost like, 4-year-old operations in the sense you've got to be, but why? But why? Yes. And then the other thing is that I think because there are so many great off-the-shelf tools now, and they are really fantastic, it can seem like, well, I'll just buy that tool. I've got to get the budget, 150, 200, whatever, the fee is. And it's because it's designed by a group of very smart people, it's just going to do the job. And that's simply not true. It has to be wired in. You can wire every single tool into your organization in completely different ways, depending on who you are and what you want. Or the tool you choose might be completely different depending on what you want to do with it. So, sort of back in the day, 13 years ago, when we didn't have all these great tools and vendors to work with, you had to take the time to think because you were forced to. You were going into broadcasting to create a video library. And that investigation made you pause, but we don't have that as much now. So make it for yourself, create that pause for yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's really great advice. I'm sort of curious, obviously we understand that, we need to take this more holistic view of any research ops initiative that we're sort of embarking on and think from a service design perspective and a system design perspective. Also, you mentioned doing user research, you're researchers, but you're stakeholders as well, and anyone that might interface with research. I'm kind of curious, like, what kinds of activities or things do you see really successful research ops leaders doing that kind of help them to actually enact this vision or achieve these positive changes through those initiatives?
It is really all about strategy. We have got a real problem with strategy in the research space. Very few researchers have a strategy, like a really serious research strategy. And if you don't know what you're doing with research, you cannot operationalize it. Even, to expand beyond, because research operations doesn't directly report to research all the time. More and more, I'm seeing that research operations has been set up as a direct line to product or marketing or creative ops is a new word I'm hearing. And so, I made an assumption until about mid last year that research operations was predominantly, as a still maturing profession, reporting into research, and that's not the case at all. And so sometimes it's a product manager who wants to have better research, and then it's research operations there, but there's still no real strategy around research. It's like, well, let's just do research. So the biggest thing that the leaders in research operations are doing is working with research leaders who are putting together a research strategy. And then they're able to say, right, okay, so let's go for an example. This year, the corporation is focusing on expanding in Japan. One of my favorite examples. It's the one I go to all the time. And so we need to go and understand the culture of those users. And actually what we're going to do is we're going to do field research. We're going to get back out into the field and we're going to do that kind of research because of X, Y, Z. That's the best strategy for research. Or actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to hire an amazing agency in Japan and they're going to do the research for us. Whatever your strategy is around how you're going to deliver that kind of knowledge into the organization to help it achieve its goals is an example of one of the priorities you might have in a research strategy. From an operations point of view, the research ops leader can go, amazing. Now I realize that from a recruitment strategy, a participant recruitment strategy, I need to get really great at recruiting Japanese people. Mm-hmm. How does recruiting work in Japan? Cultures are different. I know I've spoken to someone recently in Dubai who said, people in Dubai, when you're recruiting there, they don't know what research is. They haven't experienced a user testing or they haven't been in those environments. It's a brand new experience. You have to actually explain what the experience of taking part in research is all about. Whereas in other countries, it's I know what a panel is. So it can really change your entire strategy around what you're doing. And that's what they're doing. They're getting specific. And it goes back to the systems. Systems are defined as being specific. A system is specific. And you cannot be specific and you cannot create a specific system if you're not specific about what you want to achieve. Mm-hmm. That's the number one thing.
Mm-hmm. I think that's it. You're so right in terms of strategy being something that a lot of UX research professionals really struggle with. I'm sort of curious, Kate, have you ever come across a situation where you have a research op, maybe it's a person who is a research ops, they've been hired to be a research ops leader for a company, and they're working within, maybe they're reporting to research in this case, and the lead researcher doesn't have a strategy. What advice would you give to that research ops person? Does that even happen?
It happens all the time. And I do a fair amount of coaching, strategic advisory work with research leaders and research operations leaders. And the dream is that your research leader has a strategy and you can dovetail with it and help operationalize their strategy. That is where we want to get to as a profession, as a wider research profession. But if that's not the case, there's no excuse not to come up with a strategy. I think one of the biggest things that I've seen in myself over the years, I was in this position 5 years ago, where I was told to put together a strategy, like a 4 or 5 year strategy, which in itself is actually bogus. Forget about a 5 year strategy if you don't have a strategy. That's not where you start. You start with a 1 year strategy. Once you've got your 1 year down, then you can start looking further down the line and start thinking 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. But to start with a 5 year strategy is a waste of time. But I was really flummoxed. It took me a long time to figure out, what am I supposed to do? I felt very overwhelmed by the concept of it. And I got to reading, what am I supposed to do about strategy here? And there's a wonderful book by Richard Rumelt called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. And it's really, what I love about it is he boils it down to, a strategy is simply about responding to your immediate challenges and opportunities. It isn't a visionary goal for we're going to Mars. It could become that over time when you're mature enough to have that kind of foresight, but it's practical. You should be able to achieve your strategy. If you aren't able to achieve your strategy, it's not a good strategy. So this idea of having some unachievable stretch goal, which is quite popular in tech, is actually not a very good strategy. You should be able to achieve it. Yes, it should maybe, you might not know every part of the strategy and how it's going to be delivered, but you have a good idea. It's a plan. It's a workable plan. Mm-hmm. When you take that view, suddenly for me, the mist cleared. I didn't need to have people with amazing strategies around me. What I needed to go was, well, the challenge that I'm hearing is that people aren't able to recruit customers. They can recruit from XYZ places, but customers are hard to get hold of. Let me go and find out what customers. Why? Those good, like, standard questions. Challenges is that I'm hearing from researchers that we have all these amazing reports that are being created, but then they disappear into thin air after that. Such a common problem. Well, I could gather every single report, which we did, but is there a particular type of report or a particular audience of those reports that is that's going to really deliver value into the organization? And if you have that kind of, again, going back to my new phrase, for your old operations, if you go back to that, you'll start to form a strategy that will get you from navigating in the mists, barely navigating, floating around, responding to firefighting and whirlwinds coming in, and being frustrated with your work and feeling like you're never quite getting there and you can't show your value and you can't measure it, to now having like discrete set of goals that you can sell into your management and to others around you, and that you can measure the success of, which is a huge thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kate, in your book, you talk a little bit about how research departments are often seen as cost centers rather than profit centers. We've obviously seen the impact of this over the last few years. Obviously, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of contraction happening in tech jobs. A lot of researchers have unfortunately lost their jobs, as well as research ops professionals. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are on what research ops could do to help prove their value, to keep research ops professionals working, doing the valuable work that they're doing, and also researchers as well.
Yeah, okay. So this goes back to that question about building Rome in a day and the overwhelmed experience of how do I come in and build Rome in a day? And I rewound from that and said, well, start with a really well-designed building, or think of it as a highly functional village that you start out with. And I think this is a really big thing. If you don't have a huge buy-in for research operations yet, you're not going to win by going in and saying, well, I'm going to build Rome and it's going to have aqueducts and a harbor and all these amazing things. And you're only going to see it in 100 years' time, and you have to pay a lot of money for it. And we'll have to take over half of the world to make it happen. But we're going to get there. That's not the way to sell in. The way to sell in is to spot the one big problem or the one big opportunity. Again, it goes back to strategy. All roads lead to strategy in the end. And get buy-in for that. And maybe you don't get all the money that you want or the headcount that you want, but you find the best way to scrap together the best thing that you can do, and you deliver that. Make sure you've got a strategy, I'm recruiting X number of people per month, or I'm collecting X number of reports, and X number of people are going to benefit from this in X number of ways. You've got this measured down. You think of SMART goals. And so then what you can do is suddenly your communication changes, because when you're wanting to get buy-in, you can keep reporting and going back and saying, well, we've achieved this, or we're 30% off that, or here's the value that we've delivered. And you can tell a very clear story, and you can get buy-in for that very clear story. It's not just like, well, I'm going to procure this thing that's going to cost $200,000, $300,000, whatever. And I don't actually know when it's delivered. If you can get that, and people will start to trust your clarity and your sense of direction, they will give you more money at some point. Or you'll get buy-in to go and hang out with someone else in a different crew and give them something and they pay for it. I've done things where I noticed that there was, in an organization, there was a big priority around accessibility. It was a blocker between the product and enterprise customers. And they had built an amazing team around accessibility with an incredibly smart leader, like an amazing head of. And I thought, well, if I go hang out there, they're going to need to do accessibility research. It's a very specific type of operations. And I put together very specific strategy around accessibility research. They were in the money because this is where the founder's attention was on that. So I knew that if I could tell the right story, money would come my way. And as me and my team, we could build some stuff that would be influential at the founder level. And so now I had funds, I have something to do that's meaningful. It's a brilliant way to work, because when you can show that value and deliver something, you will get funding for the next building or the next part of your city that you're building.
I think that's great advice. And I think there's a couple of things that I thought were really poignant there. The point about telling a story, which is storytelling is so important, as a research ops professional, as a UX professional, in so many different aspects of our work. And this is no exception. Also, speaking to the right people and having that visibility at the right level is so important. I think a lot of research ops professionals perhaps kind of squirrel away and are sort of doing that knee-jerk operations work, but perhaps are not working at a strategic level or at a level where people can take notice of all the great work that they're doing. And so that's something that possibly research ops professionals may need to think about if they're struggling to get buy-in for certain things. And I think it all again leads back to the strategy, like picking pieces of work that really tie into, that's relevant to what stakeholders or the founders are really concerned about. So I think those were some really fantastic points and advice that you just imparted there.
There is one other thing to add to that. I think I've worked most of my career as a consultant, bar a couple of stints. Atlassian was almost 5 years. But I worked very hard to maintain my consultant mindset while being part of a team. And the reason is that I find, at least, and I notice it a lot, that when you're in an organization, it can be quite easy to become tunnel visioned on your job scope. And it's busy and you're overwhelmed and you're just dealing with the day to day. If you don't build pauses in, and I've spoken about pauses a few times, but if you don't build pauses into your workspace and into your life space, really, you just don't have the capacity to step back and get above the noise and look down and see the players and see where you can insert yourself. So it's really important. I've spoken about this a number of times in various forums, and it's so important. Last year, I think I said it was the most important thing I've said all year. So if you've been sort of half listening, this is time to prick your ears up and listen hard. Even being really busy, I took out every quarter a week. No meetings, barely any Slack. I do half an hour quickly at the beginning and end of the day, and a full week to be able to step back, look at strategy, look at our operating reports. We had quarterly operating reports that my team produced around what are we doing, what's working, what's not working, to really reconsider, are we going in the right direction? Could we improve this? Where should we be putting our attention next month? What am I saying? I've got time to read the organization's priorities and strategies and reports. I can read design strategy, product management strategy, how are things lining up? And I can get for myself that bird's eye view of what's going on in the organization. And I can give myself time to percolate, go for a walk on the beach or in the park, and actually think about these things and create a relationship with them. It is the single biggest favor you could do for yourself and for your work. It was gold. Eventually, the team that I was working, the leadership team, they all admired and envied my week off, and very rarely got around to doing it. You have to just put it in the calendar a quarter before, or set them up for your entire year. So no one books in meetings during that time, and there's no reason to give it up. And you just commit to it because you're committing to working in ways that are clear, value-driven, and you have actually a better work-life balance at the end of the day where you're not working like crazy because you're answering everybody's request and whim.
Yeah. That's such great advice. So we at Nielsen Norman Group call it our focus time. But I totally understand how things go because, if you don't fill your time, someone else will. And so you'll end up just, responding and being reactionary rather than being strategic. I'm sort of curious, Kate, I know you sort of mentioned things are changing so quickly in the field. Obviously, AI is one area where we seem to see, new enhancements in various tools or in processes that designers and product professionals are employing, with the latest sort of AI developments. I'm kind of curious, do you have any thoughts on how research ops as a field might change or might start to kind of morph in terms of these new progressions in the field?
Yeah. I guess, that how you answer that question is depends on where you stand with AI and whether you believe it's going to take over the world and destroy humanity or going to be so useless that we give up on it in 5 years' time or whatever your belief system is. I think it's got incredible value. I still feel like it's a tool. And And on that basis, like with all tools, you have to think about how it's used, how it's placed, the roadways and how people engage with it, how people get to it and how they engage with it. They've got to be plumbed into your research space, in a sense. And I think AI is the same. I think when we kind of get over what is either panic or over optimism, and we settle down in the middle somewhere and go, wow, something really useful, we can take that time again, step back, have a look at where are the various points in the journey that we could use AI to help smooth the path, automate, or completely take over? And what is appropriate at this point in time? Where is a researcher or a participant or a consumer actually better served by a human being there, or a human in the loop, as it is now said in the industry? I really feel like that's the work that's going to be done. And if we can do that, I think there's an enormous amount of power in it for research operations. It's just that right now, what I'm hearing from people is, because of the efficiencies and the kind of budget cuts and things, like the word of the moment for everybody is efficiency. It always has been, but it's now in capital letters, _italics. and now AI came in just this time. It's sort of unfortunate timing when efficiency is the big thing. And there's a sense of like, well, we're going to spend loads more money on the tools that have got AI in them, but they're going to save us like 5 people of salary. So there's 1 poor or 2 like research ops people who've been tasked with 5 people's jobs if they've lost 5 people recently. And on top of trying to do 5 people's jobs, trying to get to grips with a new technology and the culture around a new technology. Can we trust it? I don't know. Should we use it? The sort of researchers are not wanting to use it. So in some cases, some are really kind of jumping in kind of making the most out of it. And people are trying to figure out, how do I try and make myself time to even get to know what this technology is? We're spending all this money and I don't even know if I can show value. And the tools have kind of thrown it in there as well, many of them. I think it will settle down in the next year or 2, even quite quickly, possibly even the next 6 months. And I think more and more we'll start to see some really intelligent, jargon-free conversation come out about, like, actually at this particular point, it's proven to be really fantastic. At that particular point, it was terrible.
And I think everything that we've discussed, that we've been talking about so far about research operations as being this how important strategy is, how important that sort of holistic service design, systems thinking that's required, like that can't be replaced with AI.
No.
Maybe it can replace some of the grunt work, but right now I think, I totally agree with the sentiment that we should see this as a tool in our toolbox, but there's a lot to be explored to see how it could be valuable.
I think it could be really valuable. In my mind, I see a collision of old and new, because Maria, if you think about a lot of the things we've spoken about already, a lot of the skills in research ops are that you could be reading, you could do millions of PhDs and be reading forever, because librarianship, we've had that since ancient Egypt. How do you collate and understand knowledge is such a huge field. Creating community. We've done that again since the first caveman probably started to create community around him or her. A lot of the things that we are doing are not learning. Like, learning has been since the dawn of time. And this is really, as research, we're it's old ancient stuff that we're doing in brand new contexts. And now it's colliding with a brand new thing, AI. And I think when you can see what we're doing as being like basic structure of human life, for me, that's what broadens out and also enables, from a learning and growth perspective, just this massive world to be able to kind of dig into, to be able to work in really interesting and creative ways. And this is kind of my fine art background, maybe coming back in modern organizations. And if you can do that, even if you're in a research ops position and you're an administrator and you're feeling like, I'm kind of like supposed to be doing this interesting work that Kate keeps talking about, but I'm just administrating all the time. And it's just a painful nightmare for me. And I do hear this sometimes. You've got to just, again, step back, pause, get creative, stick your head up, prick your ears up, and start to look around and see things from a completely different point of view. It will shake up how you even define your problems and therefore how you solve them. And I think you'll have so much more fun with it. If you're a research leader or a product leader or design leader, etc., marketing, and you're curious about ResearchOps, do not go and hire an administrator as your first operations person. That's your third, fourth, fifth hire. Go and hire a service designer. Let them dig into research, the research world. Let them read my book. Let them kind of absorb what research is about. Within 6 months, they'll be doing an incredible job for you. Or find yourself a senior ResearchOps leader, few and far between, but more and more out there.
Yeah. So I know there's so much more in the book that we could talk about, Kate. We could talk possibly all day about every single chapter because there's so much good stuff in there. I just encourage listeners, if you are working in research operations or you're curious about research operations, definitely get a hold of the book. The book starts off with really great introduction to like strategy and everything that Kate was talking about, but then also gets into like particulars of like actually how to, some success stories, some case studies of like how to actually enact some of these various initiatives. Kate, maybe is there anything else that you want to like leave people with, like mulling over in terms of like the big takeaways from your book or anything we haven't really like chatted about in this hour together?
So the only thing that I would add is if you are a product manager, design manager, anyone leading within the UX space, but even outside of UX and marketing, pick up the book, not just because I want you to buy it, which I do, but not just because of that, but because understanding customers. I mean, what I find interesting right now is that even though the research profession has seen massive layoffs in the last few years, the appetite for research is massive. No one's arguing that research is valuable. I haven't seen that argument anywhere. So in some ways, it's like there's this all-time high appetite for research, just that there isn't the budget and the proof that researchers are the only people to deliver it. So research leaders, buy the book, figure out your strategy. Number one, hire your first operations person if you haven't hired them yet as a systems designer, a service designer, a strategist. Call me in. I'll help you out with it. And start from there. Really step back, pause, take that week off per quarter, get a sense of what you're even doing and why. Who is it delivering value to? What does it cost? Who cares? Ask all those questions. And really make sure that you are working on all the systems that deliver knowledge into the space, deliver customer insights into the space. And I just cannot see that that's not going to be valued in the long run when you get really particular about it.
That's great advice. Well, this has been so inspiring and insightful, as expected, Kate. I wondered, obviously people should go away and read the book, but is there any place that people can find out like what you're working on, what the latest is in terms of your work?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, I'm not a rampant LinkedIn poster, but I'm on LinkedIn. Substack, you can find me on Substack under Kate Towsey, and I can send that link to you for show notes if you would do that. And then middle of the year, I'm launching these actually on my website, katetowsey.com. Next week, I've got 6 to 8 masterclasses called Defining a ResearchOps Strategy. It's a one-day masterclass. I'm keeping them small, maximum of 25 people. And they're in person. I'm not running them virtually. It's time to be real. And so they'll happen all across Europe in June, July, and possibly in the States in October, still to be confirmed.
Awesome.
But yeah, keep an eye out on those. And if you want to work on your research operation strategy, which will enforce you to work on your research strategy too, that'll be a good place to come hang out with me.
Great. Got a busy few months ahead of you.
I do. It's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and, really kind of allowing me to grill you and ask you lots of questions about the book and about research operations. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Maria, it's been really great to hang out with you, and thanks for being so thoughtful in your questions as well.
That was Kate Towsey. This year, Kate is running masterclasses in Australia and Europe for leaders and emerging leaders who want to revolutionize how research operates in their organizations. Masterclasses are small by design, tailor-made, and include pre-work and asynchronous coaching. But even if you're not in Australia or Europe, her book, Research That Scales, is an excellent resource, and information about any of these can be found in the show notes or on her website, katetowsey.com. And don't forget about the Energy website, where you can find thousands of articles and videos, as well as upcoming courses on a broad range of UX topics. In fact, In February, I'll be teaching some full-day classes on design operations and service blueprinting, along with dozens of other great UX courses by my amazing and talented colleagues. So check out www.nngroup.com, that's NNGROUP.com, for more details. This show was hosted by Maria Rosala and executive produced by me, Therese Fessenden. Our producer and editor is Chrissy Richardson. That's it for today's show. Until next time, remember, keep it simple.